Sanji Virasat or shared heritage is the new term as far as we are concerned. Because of various divisive politics, we are being driven to defend our inclusive reality that always existed in the world of textiles. There have been evidences of availability of textile in the tombs of pharaohs, in the excavation of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Initially, it was a cottage industry. Later on, much later on rather, in the last 2 centuries, got organized in mill sector. If you're talking purely of Indian context, of Indian origin, even today, textile is very much in the unorganized sector. The big mills we see have very little contribution coming out from India, technology-wise. The machineries are imported, the technology is imported, the training imparted by foreign experts, and these countries who are now giving us the knowledge of textiles didn't even know ABC of textiles when India was far, far advanced. One of the greatest exponents of textile is Kabir, and perhaps his one Doha describes the India's progress towards technology. Godhan, Gajdhan, Bajdhan और रतन धन खान जब आए संतोष धन सब धन धूरी समान. The minute we made the first hand loom, I am not sure whether it was a backpack loom or the table loom, we made the first charkha on which we spun the yarn. Even today, the Indian technocrats have not advanced. Maximum they have done is instead of using wood, they have started using steel pipes. Where earlier 1 yard of fabric could be woven in 1 hour, now 1 yard and 22.5 inches can be woven. When we talk of textile, we have to see what is the raw material. For textile is drawn from 3 sources. One is natural or plant fiber, animal fiber and synthetics. Cotton was a natural product of tropical country. There have been evidences of cotton being grown in India, Americas and Africa 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. The first step in textile process is to remove the seed from the fiber. This process is called ginning. Traditionally, it was done by hand. It was a laborious process. You held in one hand the ball of cotton and then you peeled each and every fiber separately till a mechanical device was found. The next process was spinning it. Being one of the oldest craft, textile occupies a very, very important place in our social fabric, that perhaps after agriculture, it is the largest. And even when we talk of agriculture sector, growing cotton is also a part of textile industry. After the yarn was spun, then came the stage of weaving. Weaving consists of what is popularly known as tana, vana or warp and weft. Warp is the linear, long length of yarns. A lot of them are put together. Bana, the weft or filling, is the shorter length of yarn which is fed horizontally through the 2 strands of yarns. So that's the process of bana crossing the tana is the birth of the cloth. To save time, to increase the yield, methods like carding. Carding is cleaning after the ginning has been done, and combing, when you could separate from the same ball of cotton the shorter lengths and longer lengths. Shorter lengths could be used for coarser fabrics and the longer length of yarn spun together would be stronger, obviously, would be used for more expensive, finer fabric like poplins, muslins, voiles. Spinning machines, again, were evolved not in India but United Kingdom. England had no history of growing cotton. It was when British East India Company came, when Vasco da Gama came, he saw for the first time very fine cloth being made in the port of Calicut. He took shiploads of the fabric, and the whole world came to call that fabric calico, and the term still is being used, calico cloth. When British East India came, they saw massive textile industry in India, extensive farming of cotton. They started exporting. First, they started exporting the Indian raw cloth. They used to take it to England, have it finished. Finishing means dyeing it, printing it, pre-shrinking it, selling it all over the world, and bringing it back to India at 5 times the value. British East India Company realized that if we started taking cotton from India and converting it into the made finished product, the profit will be 10 times more. At the same time, when the British colony was growing, they went to Americas, which is not just North America, but includes Latin America too. They found cotton from Americas was not only much better than Indian cotton, was also much cheaper. Why it was cheaper? Because the cultivation was done by slaves who were not required to be paid even a few pennies that the Indian farmers were required to be paid. So slavery helped a lot in development of cotton textile in England. Also, linen could not be a replacement for cotton because as a fiber it was very difficult to handle. It's not as malleable as cotton is. It's not as porous as cotton is. So cotton continued to stay as a popular fabric, whereas linen became a fabric of the haves. And before the advent of 20th century, when we talk of, page 3, every day you are seeing the cocktails being thrown by designers and designers attending it, and designers shop. Everything is designer. But before designer was born, who was the designer? Who was the artist? It was the craftsman. He created the design of tanchoi, jamawar. Then there was another great skill. Now very, very few practicing artists, I would say, can be found in a small place in western UP called Najibabad. Their speciality, they were literally an extension of rag pickers. They used to collect old, worn out, design textile and collect them till they had hoards, and then one of them will sit, take cuttings from various things and try to imagine a new design. And the design was created by darning rafugari, perhaps the most expensive piece of textile that you can get today, is jamawar. So the greatest thing with textile in Indian context is human element in it. You weren't working with machine. Machine was secondary. It was the human skill, the human temperament. The colors change. During Eid, you had different colors being created. During Holi, you had different colors being created. During Muharram, a lot of black was being made during Diwali, a lot of gold and tenchoi and lurex and silver, things were made. So it's extremely human industry. Samples which have come out of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa excavation. We did not have kasidakari in India. The needlework, the decoration on the fabric. First of all, we needed something to cover our body, something to protect ourselves from weather. So we had wool, we had silk, we had flax, we had cotton. But when you were satisfied with that need, then the desire for more. Then came the decorative part. And that's where the contribution from different communities, different religions, religious groups rather, made it a possibility. You have the best example. The muslins are woven by Hindu weavers. The kasidakari, the famous Lucknow chicken work, is done by all Muslim workers, Muslim women. Most of these workers had moved to India from Afghanistan, from Persia, where there was already another very important part of weaving, textile. It may not be an apparel fabric, it's carpet industry. Carpet is also woven on looms. You don't use fly shuttle because unlike silk and cotton or flax textile, where you make long lengths, the daris, the rugs, the carpet, you make it according to your need. If you need 6 by 9, you'll only make a warp of 9.5 feet. There is something called secondary weft, which is knotting. You put up a vertical loom, with the warp on it, you pass a weft, and then by hand, you insert a third yarn, which is called secondary, and it's knotted. Now that knot is actually the father of modern day embroidery. And this was something which was not part of, as we call, Bharati Sabhyata. It was not part of that. It came, definitely the influence came from outside. Variety of material, it's man-made, nor it's plant-grown. It's made through an inorganic process using petroleum byproduct, coal, water, air.
Cloth comes in various sizes, colors, designs. Some of them are specific to important social and religious customs. And in a total cultural context, if you look at textiles, it's more than just cloth. It's actually a visual representation of your history, your philosophy, your ethics, your oral literature, your moral values, your religious beliefs, your political thoughts, your aesthetic principles. And across the world, spinning and weaving have actually been metaphors of life. Ancient Greek legend talks about the fact that when someone was born, the first fate, Clotho, would spin the thread of life. Lachesis would measure a certain length, and Atropos would cut the thread when your life came to an end. Weaving is actually one of the earliest of human crafts. The natural fibers of today were already there in pre-Christian times, and they've been valued as commercial commodities. They've been sought, they've been traded, they have rivaled each other as industries. The rise of one has often triggered the decline of another. They've played a major role in the socio-economic and legislative development of nations. The earliest textile structures were actually nets, storage items like baskets, covering for huts. And weaving actually appeared before spinning, because the word textile is derived from the Latin word texere, which means to weave. The cotton is turned into cloth in Lancashire. You pay shilling wages instead of Indian pennies to your workers. The English worker not only has the advantage of better wages, but the steel companies of England get the profit of building the factories and the machines. All these profits, the wages, all this is spent in England. The finished product is sent back to India at European shipping rates, once again on British ships. The captains, the officers, the sailors of these ships, their wages must be paid in English shillings. They are all English. The only Indians who profit are a few labourers who do the dirty work of the Lashkars. The cloth is finally sold back to the kings and landlords of India, who get the money to buy this expensive cloth out of the poor peasants of India who work at 7 cents a day. They did the same thing with indigo. Indigo was a dye that was, again, centuries old, and India was one of the principal growers of this, as old as the Greco-Roman era. The Greek word for dye is indicon. The Romans used the term indicum, and eventually it passed into English as the word indigo. Now what happened? They were forced to grow indigo as opposed to food crops. Resulted in famines. When the peasantry rebelled, and the middle classes, if you look at the names of all the people who were present or who were instrumental in those revolts, it cuts across religious divides. Another very, very important old textile was linen. Linen comes basically from the hemp fabric, and it's been discovered in Swiss lake dwellings 8000 BC. Remnants of that. It's also found in tombs of pharaohs. Mummies were always wrapped with linen. So linen was a very durable fiber. It also took wear and tear extremely well. But it was more difficult than cotton to weave. So it was always more expensive. So cotton was actually like the answer to the world's needs. In the West, even today, linen is used as an heirloom. Like it's passed down from family to family because of its durability, because of its wonderful wear and tear properties, and because of the fact that it's expensive. Cotton did cause major upheavals around the world. It was probably because of cotton that the whole industrial revolution happened, which impacted the whole world. The other very, very interesting fiber, of course, is silk. You see, the thing, why we are talking about these different things is because you see how in everything it's an interconnection. Nothing happens in isolation here. Silk is a natural protein fiber. And where you get the shimmer from is the fact that it is a three-dimensional fiber. It's like a triangular fiber. And that's what reflects, the light. So you get that whole shimmer. This, again, was very, very prized. It was definitely, we do find old antique references in Mohenjo-daro, in Egypt, but this was definitely developed as an industry by the Chinese. It was supposed to be a Chinese princess who actually developed this whole industry. Cocoon is supposed to have dropped into her tea cup. So, like she wanted to pull it out and she caught hold of one end of the thread and it just kept coming out, and that's how she discovered silk. China immediately realized that this is a fantastic fabric and nobody else knows about this. So they again were very careful. The monopolies that they established, the protective measures that they established, told the secrets of silk to anybody outside China of that time. The sentence was death. But then again, there's a legend that there was a princess who got married out of China, what is called Khorasan. And she said, I'm not going, without my silk. So she carried some cocoons there. And this is about the 1st century AD. And from Khorasan, it moved to Persia, it moved to India, it moved to, parts of the Middle East, and became again a very, very important part of the economy everywhere. Again, the Western world got it only after the Crusades. Brocades in India were influenced very heavily by the Persian influences, by the Turkestan influences, by the Khorasan influences, the Chinese, the Japanese. Nothing in India actually happened in isolation or anywhere else in the world. Everything was always like
shared heritage.
shared. It was so completely a shared heritage. The whole exploratory process, the whole movement from the east to the west and west to the east, and the trade and the exchange was all along this very important route called the Silk Route. And silk, like our gold standard today, was actually the standard of measure then. You use the silk standard, not the gold standard. But it was very expensive. It was impacting other economies. Seneca the Younger, he says that this is decadent, this is immoral. He says, I can see clothes of silk. If materials that do not hide the body, nor even one's decency, can be called clothes. Wretched flocks of maids labor so that the adulteress may be visible through her thin dress, so that her husband has no more acquaintance than any outsider or foreigner with his wife's body. I mean, that's how bad the connotations of silk were in the Western world. But that was basically because it was impacting their economy, their livelihoods. Other cultures also looked down upon silk. In the Muslim world, men were traditionally not allowed to wear silk because they thought it was too feminine, it was decadent. Islamic women were, allowed. From there, a very interesting fabric developed in India, which is called the mushru. The mushru is basically, you can weave silk in the warp, have cotton in the weft or linen in the weft, but it's basically a mixed fiber. It's not a simple fiber. And it again was one of our biggest exports to the, Middle East and all those areas. Now we come back to India. Where and how did we develop silk here? After the influence of Persia, what happened was a group of Parsis came across to Gujarat. They were the first ones who brought the whole brocade industry here. They used to, use pearls in their original patterns. And from Gujarat, weavers kept moving, kept migrating to different parts of the country, carrying this information, and you have now brocades across the country. There are in the booties, in the figures that were used, like the pot of plenty. There is this very traditional motif. It derives from the Persian pot, which has a very delicate flute neck and a very delicate dip like that. That became the Indian ambi. It became the paisley, which again then moves back and forth. Architectural influences. You looked at structures, you looked at the engravings. Those got incorporated into textiles also. So whatever your local culture was, whatever you believed was beautiful, you incorporated that into textiles. Because textiles was always like a living, breathing, immediate source. And again, there are very interesting stories associated, like the Mughals. The Emperor Akbar was incredible in his patronage of, a lot of these arts. He imported weavers, Persian weavers, Turk weavers. They're the ones who worked on the carpets, who worked on the silks, who worked on the brocades. Jahangir encouraged this. Shah Jahan, of course, loved everything that was beautiful. So he also worked really intensively. And they used to actually establish these workshops in their own palaces so that they could oversee the influences. Tanchoi, which is now very traditionally associated with Banaras, is again a fallout of all these influences. And Tanchoi, again, the story goes that it means three Chinese. Three Chinamen came, taught in the courts, taught the craft, moved on. And Banaras today epitomizes the intermixing of all the influences. They say in a Banarsi sari or from a Banarsi sari, the warp is the Hindu weaver and the weft is the Muslim weaver. Because the communities have always lived together in harmony. They've always worked together. And this is such a vast, vast, vast field. It involves so many people that there is no which way that you can be selective in your, that I will only take this and I will not take that. It is composite. It has to be composite. Your fabric itself is composite. And of course, Kabir, who lived in Banaras, nobody knows whether he was born a Hindu or a Muslim, but he was definitely brought up by Muslim julahas, weavers. And I personally think, because I'm so involved with textiles, I personally think that weaving and by itself did influence his worldview to a degree, which is why he uses that as a metaphor so often in his, explanation or his ideas. When he talks about kahe ka tana, kahe ki bharni, kaun tar se bini chadariya, what is he talking about? He's expressing exactly these sentiments. He's talking about how we are composite human beings. We have to imbibe from everywhere and we put it together, and that's how it grows, that's how it evolves. Wherever monopolies were tried, like if you look at Great Britain, because that was one of the prime centers for wool production. And they were very protective about it, and they did not want influences to come in. They did not want their expertise to go anywhere else. So because of establishing monopolies on it, what happened? There was a glut. There was overproduction. There was just not enough use for it. The wool industry got a solid beating around the 19th century, again because of the movement of cotton and silk, which is way more interesting. And the wool industry got a solid beating around the 19th century, again because of the movement of cotton and silk. So protectionism of this kind has never worked. The other thing that has always been very interesting is to see how textiles and fabric has always had political ramifications. But the way Gandhi used it, it was brilliantly used as a political metaphor. When he actually used the charkha as a symbol of satyagraha, he said one of the first flag carried the charkha. It's fascinating, and he understood basically that the exploitation of the Indian peasant was happening through this whole, the Manchester mills and the Lancashire mills. This industry, because it's so wide-based, the base is so large, it cannot have divisions of, the narrow partisan kinds. But there is another shift happening, and the shift is to synthetics.
It can replace silk, it has replaced wool, but there is no way it can replace cotton.
India developed because of the multicultural influences that we absorbed, that we incorporated, that we, kept evolving things with.